It's our deadline deal recap episode. Which players that were traded will gain or lose value? Who else will gain or lose fantasy value? How much fab should you spend now on replacements? Plus, we'll have our regular waiver wire, pitcher preview, and injury segments, and some bonus trivia to boot. That's all coming up next on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me, as always, is Ruvain Guy. What's going on, Ruvain?
I'm doing great today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great softball week. We won 10-1 on Sunday, 5 strikeouts, 2 hits only, and last night, 5 hits, 7 innings. We won 8-1, so our teams are rolling. So excited as we, summer is going by really quickly. How about you?
Yeah, same here. My softball team is actually starting the playoffs next week of a 3-game series next week, so we'll see how that works out. But we're coming up to the dog days of summer, as they say in the lingo, I guess, of baseball. The dog days of summer.
There you go. By the way, do you know why they call them the dog days of summer?
I do not.
I think our guest knows. Patrick Davitt is our guest on Baseball HQ Radio. Patrick, how do you know about the dog days of summer? Where did that come from?
Because the constellation Sirius is in the sky at this time of year, and Sirius is considered the dog star.
There you go. That is absolutely correct. As we get closer to the winter and in the early morning, the constellation, the big dog, and Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky, comes up. That is absolutely right. The little dog.
I usually give the trivia questions. I don't know. We're gonna have to get Jeopardy questions now.
Astronomy questions.
The little dog also will come, Procyon, or I forget how it's pronounced, Procyon or whatever. But that's the little star, the little dog. But Sirius is the big one, very bright star. Both of them in the winter circle. I'm a little bit of an astronomy guy. I don't know if you guys know that. So I knew about this one.
Yep.
So when does the XM star come?
The what?
The XM star.
What's the XM
star? As opposed to the
Sirius. We got Sirius, so we should have XM.
There you go.
Yeah.
You can see the satellite in the evening sky.
Patrick, how you doing in your expert leagues this year?
Well, I only play in 4 leagues, and one of them's a draft and hold. In Tout Wars, I'm 5th, but I'm a pretty strong 5th, and I still have aspirations to get to 3rd. I've got to play. My team is built on a very strong pitching staff. I have 7 starters that I run in and out, and I'm leading the league in ERA and WHIP, which I think is quite unusual for somebody using that many starters. And I've got a good position in strikeouts, and I don't have a good position in wins, but I should have. You know what I mean? I've got lots of quality starts. It's just a bullpen blown here and a lack of run support there, and it's hard to catch up. But I'm catching up, so I'm pretty excited about grinding all the way to the end in Tout. In my surf, it's an Earth League team here in Canada. I'm 15th out of 15th. It's the worst team I've ever had. It's actually funny. It's so bad. Injuries, underperformance, everything that can go wrong has gone wrong. I think my best pitching category is 14th. I've got 13th. So 13th and a couple of 14th and a couple of 15th. It's just tremendously bad. And then in TGFBI, I'm somewhere in the lower middle, more awful pitching. I had a lot of boring old guys this year. That was kind of my outlook for the season. So I've got a lot of Nolan Arenados and Paul Goldschmidts and stuff. And of course, they were fairly high draft picks, and they just didn't do anything this year. So that was a big mistake. And I'm 20th in the overall in Raz Slam, but I have no idea. I don't understand how the rules work. It's very complicated. So I'm just going to sit around and wait till somebody sends me an email saying I won if I won.
Yeah, just sit back and Raz Slam. It's a best ball. Just you go with that. Oh, awesome. Yep. Good stuff. So, we just had the deadline, the Major League Trading deadline, and thought we'd do a little bit of a deadline recap episode. I don't want to go through all the trades and, is this good, is that good? But we will highlight some players, some strategy about which players might gain value, what players not traded might gain value that you might want to pick up in your fantasy league or you can expect more from. So we'll do all that. But of course, we do want to talk a little strategy in general, and we want to start about fantasy trades, as it might be in some of your fantasy leagues, your fantasy trading deadline, and in a league that I play against Ruve, in the GDD league, which is mostly experts, I play with Derek Carty. We're on the same team. We're in third. Actually, we're in second place now. We just passed Ruvain in third, and Ruvain just made a rather large trade. You traded Logan Webb for Josh Hader. Ruvain, why don't you tell us a little bit about of why, how that came about, and we can analyze it.
Sure, no problem. I don't know if I should say who I traded with because I don't know. I don't want to say anything bad about him, but it was great working with my trade partner. We sent back a lot of ideas back and forth, and we worked really well together and got the trade done pretty quickly. But the reason why I did the trade is this: I was in first place up until about 3 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden my ERA, my WHIP, and my saves started tanking. So I was losing points in three categories. I mentioned this in the podcast a couple weeks ago, where I lost about 12 points, 12 to 13 points, just in those three categories. So I was looking, I thought, you know what? Maybe I can use someone who can help my ERA a little bit, WHIP, saves. So I thought to get a closer. Now I have a plethora. I like to use that word, a plethora of starting pitching on my roster. I have Nady Eovaldi, Chris Sale, Framber Valdez. I had John Gray before he got hurt, Kikuchi, Ranger Suarez, and my two closers were Clay Holmes and Rafael Iglesias. Now, because the Yankees were in a slump and the Braves were also in a slump, both those guys weren't getting any saves. So I thought I could pull a trade and trade my excess pitching, which was Logan Webb, to get a closer. My idea is that I don't necessarily need the strikeouts from Webb. I have enough starting pitching. I don't necessarily need the wins from him. I'm actually second or third in wins in the league right now. So I thought I can handle the blow of trading one of my top pitchers for a top closer, just because I thought it would help my three categories instead of losing in just like one or with wins or strikeouts.
So are you upset that you didn't take our offer? Cardi and I offered Kyle Finnegan for Sonny Gray. You didn't have to give up Logan Webb, but you got Finnegan, not as good as Hader. Obviously, there was the uncertainty of whether he would be traded or not. We would have traded him, by the way, the day after. Either way, it didn't matter to us.
Right.
Are you? Do you think you should have held out for that trade with us?
No, I like, because this trade happened to be made on Monday, the day before the trade deadline. So I did not want to trade my Sonny Gray to you for Kyle Finnegan, who could have been traded. So I wanted to get Josh Hader in my roster for this week, which was not the best thing because he gave a 3 and a homer and blew save.
And by the way, the offer's still on the table if you want to get a second closer. You let us know, man.
Yeah, no, I think I'm good. I think making this trade helps me in enough categories that I can stabilize or stop the bleeding in the categories that I have in order to get back and pass you again in the standings.
Patrick, what do you think of that trade where he gave up Logan Webb, but he did get Josh Hader?
Well, in fantasy baseball, the only thing that matters is how you move in the categories and whether you gain overall points from making the deal. And it sounds like Ruvain has thought this through and realized that piling up some more saves was going to move him in a situation where sounds like he wasn't going to get that much more points in wins and strikeouts because he has all of these other guys. So it seems to me that trading as a kind of a surplus Logan Webb, as good as he is, he gets back a guy who can actually help him in a category, which is saves. Also, the ratios, notwithstanding 3-run home runs every so often. I think it's the kind of trade that everybody should aspire to make. Sometimes guys get hung up on the names involved. Josh Hader's a better guy than Logan Webb as far as, where they stand in the closer rankings and the starting pitcher rankings. So I want a little more, or you need to give me a little more. All that kind of stuff is nonsense. Each participant in this trade got something that helped them move up in the standings. And that's the best kind of trade to make. And I tip my hat to Ruvain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to say who the trade was with, but also they can pass one of the teams that you're trying to reach and pass in both in the strikeouts and in wins. So not only did it help you in terms of you gaining points, it might help the other team lose points, which is almost as valuable, or just as valuable, I should say.
Just
right?
as valuable, yeah.
And not only that, when the reason why I was able to get Josh Hader from him is because he can only lose 1 point in saves. He can't really gain that much. He can only lose 1 point. So if he only loses 1 point and he trained to get a top flight starting pitcher, why would he not do it? So I thought that's what I was looking into categories. Who would be the most willing to part with a top closer? And I thought he was the best candidate.
Yeah, so we really do need to trade a closer for a starter. That would have really helped us. We have 80 saves on the team. The next best team has 76, and then it drops to 52. So we have absolutely excess saves. I'll tell you our roster. We've got Emmanuel Clase, Chad Green, Kenley Jansen, Kyle Finnegan, and we actually just picked up Luis Garcia, although that's probably a drop right now. But that is it's insurance for Jansen, I should say. That's a lot of saves in a 15-team league. So,
but if I get 4 more saves, I gain 4 points. I have 44 saves. The people above me are 45, 47, 47. So this is why
you should double up and trade with us again.
No, thank you. But thank you.
All right. We asked this to Fred Zinke the other week, but I wanted to get your take on it, Patrick. You could make a trade with another fantasy team, or you can simply get help off of the waiver wire. How do you know when you need to look for a trade versus just, okay, let's get a guy who's a little bit more steals, a little bit more this off the waiver wire to help your categories?
I think a lot of it depends on the depth of the league. If you're in a 12-team American League only like my Tout Wars League, there is nothing on the waiver wire. I mean, you can look around at the trade deadline, a guy comes over, or maybe a couple of guys come over, and whoever's got the big fab wallet at this point in the season gets those guys. But otherwise, if you're looking in the waiver wire, in the free agent pool for a hitter especially, there's just nothing there. You have to go into the trade market. It's a little bit easier in pitching, but even though there's a lot of names on the pitcher agent list, there's not a lot of impact sort of pitchers. So a lot of it depends on if you're playing a 10 or 12 team mixed, the free agent pool is pretty lush and you have to go look there and maybe talk about trading. But in that circumstance, I'd rather go into the free agent pool if I thought I could make it work, because then I don't have to give up anything except my worst player. Whereas if I go to somebody in my league with a trade offer, I can't offer my worst player to get a good player. I'm going to have to give a good player to get a good player. It can still work, as Ruvain explained in his deal, where we can both benefit because of the way the categories are shaped. But if there's something in the waiver pool, I'm going to go there first, because I don't have to give up a good player to get the good player. I just have to give up some fab dollars. And, with prudent management, you can make that last quite a while.
Yeah, it's about unique profiles. And certainly the deeper the league you are, the profiles that you're looking for that can help you just not available on the wire. So you're more inclined to do one of these category trades in a deeper league. In a 10-team mixed league, I mean, you obviously trading could help, but there is more reinforcements on the waiver wire waiting for you. Again, you can't find in a 15-team mixed, you can't find a 30 home run bat. They just don't exist on there. But if you need it and that helps you in the categories and you're willing to part with a closer or whatever category you're solid in, then you need to make that trade, because that's the only way to acquire that kind of production.
But also what you have to see is also how your team is trending, because a lot of times you'll see, okay, I have a couple hitters on a hot streak, so I know I'm going to gain power, RBIs, and all that stuff. But if you see, like I saw my team was trending down in certain categories, you can see what's more important for you and whether or not you can get what you want on the waiver wire, or you do have to make the trade.
Patrick, in trading leagues, do you think that there is a cost, or do you think that there is an issue with not making a trade? Let's talk redraft leagues for now. Do you, because obviously other teams can trade and improve around you. Do you think that it's incumbent upon you to trade, or at least attempt to trade, or is there a cost associated with not making the trade?
I don't think there's a direct cost in not making a trade, unless you, in retrospect, look back on the trade you could have made and realize at that point, if I'd done that the way things worked out, I would have gained 3 points in that category and lost one in the other category, and I would have ended up +2. And oh, too bad for me. But at the time you're making those deals, I think they are predictable to a certain extent. I've got a fairly big spreadsheet built with a bunch of projections in it, and each team, every player on each team in my league. And so I punch in the names of all the players that might be in the trade, and I say, oh, look, this gets me 5 points here and costs me one over there. That makes sense. I think the indirect possible cost of not making a trade is if the fantasy manager offering you the player and you turn him down, he might go and trade that same player to somebody else, and that can hurt you. So sometimes you have to keep in mind that it's almost like a sacrifice where you take on a player and that really doesn't help you, and you give away a player that only helps the guy you're helping. But you prevent that player from getting onto somebody who can really hurt you. If you're in third in the league and the fourth place guy is making that trade, he's going to trade and he's going to leap up over you, then you got to be careful about that. The problem is knowing whether when the first manager says, I've got a trade offer from Jim, who's the fourth place guy, you don't always know that it's true. I don't want to say that people are dishonest, but all's fair in love, war, and fantasy baseball. So you got to know your league mates to a certain extent in that instance. But sometimes you even have to weigh the risk of, what if he does that? He may not even be thinking of it, but you should be thinking of it. If he trades this guy to any one of 2 or 3 other players in the league, it's going to hurt me. So I'm going to act preemptively, get that guy off the market, or maybe get that guy and then turn around and wheel him to some other guy in the league somewhere else and try to make some hay that way. But ordinarily speaking, I don't think there is a direct cost. But as I said, I think that indirect cost should be in the back of your mind for consideration.
You got love, war, and fantasy baseball. Is that the order, by the way?
Well, for some people.
Well, listen, there's also there's a little bit of FOMO, fear of missing out. If you see someone else make a trade and you're like, oh, wait, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I offer that guy or something like that? You're better off just offering something. You never know if you're going to get a hit.
So from a probabilistic standpoint, when you make a trade, and if it's a good trade with your trading partner, your probability of winning the league goes up. Your partner's probability of winning the league or finishing the money wherever you're targeting goes up, and everybody else's pretty much go down. If you're not making trades, as long as nobody else makes trades, that's okay. But if you're in an active trading league, or where you guys ahead of you or around you are going to make that trade, I think that by not making the trade and they are, that's giving you a negative probability adjustment, right? You might have to do a trade just to keep pace with some of the guys around you is my feeling. And I know that for GDD, I'm sort of kicking myself that we didn't even more in terms of the saves, because we're going to have such excess in saves, right? We've got to make a trade. If we don't make a trade, we're going to have such excess. And now that you've made the trade and you've bettered yourself, well, now we're in a hole where our probability of winning has gone down. We have to somehow keep up with Ruvain, for lack of a better term.
And actually, you were the first person I came to. I asked, I saw you have a bunch of closers, and I wanted to make a trade with you. We just couldn't come to terms on what we wanted from each other. That was the only issue. But I mean, yeah, if you don't do anything, you're at risk of me passing you just tangentially. You have to now
Exactly.
see where you can gain points, and if you can find a place where you can gain points, you should trade your excess, whatever you have, to try to get those points.
Yeah, and by the way, even if you don't have the better value side, like maybe a guy is a $10 value and you have, and the other guy that might help you in the categories is just a $5 value in a vacuum, it still might help you, right? If you have all that excess value, who cares if he's a $10 player? It's not worth $10 to you anymore because you've already got that category. Don't look at values at this point in the year in a vacuum. It's all relative to the team in the final stretch. Like if you're picking up players in the last week or two, you're not looking at overall value. You're just looking at what will help you right then and now. All right, we're going to talk deadline deals recap, but first it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
So looking back at the trade deadline, there are some teams that are a little more active than others. One of the teams that was very active was the Miami Marlins. So my trivia question is this. The Marlins made the wild card series last year. They had 26 players on that playoff roster. How many players are left on it?
Patrick?
I will say 5.
Okay, Ariel, what do you think?
I'll go with 12.
The answer is 8. This is on the 40-man roster. There are 8 left. Jake Berger, Xavier Edwards, Edward Cabrera, Jesus Luzardo, George Soriano, who's in the minors right now, Jesus Sanchez, Nick Fortes, and Braxton Garrett. That's it.
Wow.
So the question is, all those Marlin players, all those Marlin players are gone, which means that other players are going to get playing time. Patrick, do you think it's worth going after any of the Marlins players that are now taking all this excess playing time?
I think there's always a reason. If you can get plate appearances, they tend to lead directly to counting stats. So yeah, I would try to at least look at the possibility of getting anybody who can improve my plate appearance count. So I'd be more interested in somebody who's going to sit right into the middle of the order and get themselves into a RBI spot or a run scored spot, which is contingent, shall we say, on the overall team context. And that's a little worrisome. I mean, this is a team that is not going to score a lot of runs down the stretch, let's be honest. So, I'll look at them, but I'm going to be pretty circumspect, and I'm going to have to be pretty sure that I'm gaining something that I can use versus what I've already got on my roster. And the way some of my rosters sit, I think probably I could improve because, hey, I'm 15th out of 15 in one league. Where else can I go but up?
So, Patrick, what are your first impressions or early reactions in general or anything specific to the deadline bonanza that we had this weekend?
Well, I had a Wednesday special edition podcast talking about the deadline deals with Ray Murphy from Baseball HQ. He talked about the major league players that moved, and Chris Blessing talked about the prospects. So all three of us kind of agreed that there was a lot of movement, there was a lot of action, but the fantasy effects of everything that happened were not as pronounced as in years past. And especially on the prospect side, we had a lot of those prospects move. I think it was 60 or something like that. But if you looked at them closely, there was nobody who was, well, there was 1 or 2 guys who were like top 3 or top 4 in their organization, and only one player who was in the top 100 at Baseball HQ's prospect list. So these were a lot of 13th, 14th best organization prospects. You know, some of them had some promise. Chris Blessing was full of information about which prospects he thought were really good captures by the teams that got them. But for the most part, it looked a lot like organization depth just being shuffled around from team to team. And I wonder if what you guys think about the possibility that the teams are getting so invested in having their own prospects come to the big leagues that we might have seen the last of the, number 1, number 3, number 4 prospects going for one major league player. The last time we saw anything like that might have been the Juan Soto trade, and you're not going to see a lot of Juan Sotos get traded, and I don't think you're going to see any big prospects moved. Baltimore has a whole cornucopia of prospects, and I think the top guy they traded was the guy who went to Miami, Connor Norby, is that his name?
Yes.
And he's not like a crown jewel in the Baltimore system for sure. And that's kind of like what the whole prospect scene was at this trade deadline. A lot of names moved, and therefore there wasn't as much excitement as I've felt in past years.
Yeah, definitely this was not a big deadline of a very high-ranking prospects moving organizations. I don't know if it's going to be the last of it. I just it didn't happen this year. I can't say that won't happen forever. Is there a push in Major League Baseball not to go that way? I don't know. I think it's maybe just a matter of how the team start. Like, for example, the Mets are in the fold. If you would have asked me a month and a half ago, are the Mets going to be buyers or sellers? I would have said sellers. And lo and behold, they're buyers, but they weren't, oh my God, we need something, let's sell the farm buyers. They were just, you know what? What can we do on a low level that will very incrementally help us this year, give us some reinforcements? Nothing that we had to go for it. Like, there's very few teams that said, you know what, we're going to go for it. We really need something to really interject it, and let's give it a shot. I think that teams just maybe probabilistically didn't find that. Like, guys like the Dodgers or Orioles. The Orioles are, they're going to make the playoffs, right? It's not a question of they're going to make it. Obviously, things will help along the way, and they think that their reinforcements are probably in-house. But there wasn't a lot of teams that calculated that, you know what, makes a big difference in our outcomes if we trade for a big guy. So sure, we'll mortgage one guy off. We just didn't have that, and I think the calculus just didn't unfold randomly this year. That's my thought, Ruvain.
There are also some trades that were just I was just scratching my head. I didn't really understand, like the Rays trading Isaac Paredes for Christopher Morel. That's like a lateral move between two
Change
teams
of
that are not
scenery
going
thing, maybe?
anywhere.
Change of scenery thing?
But why? I mean, weren't they high in Christopher Morel starting in the beginning of the year? Maybe they soured on him. And in the Giants, they trade away Jorge Soler, but they trade for Mark Canha. I mean, are they going for it? Are they
Money
not
dump?
going for it? It doesn't make any sense. The one thing that I saw that really was interesting and it probably affected fantasy teams the most was that the Padres built a super bullpen. They have so many arms there now. It's unbelievable. They can go closer by committee the rest of the year because they have so many closers that they can use.
Yeah, I saw that. Some impressions that I have in no particular order. I agree with you. I think the bullpen fortifying, that's been seen around here. The Red Sox got better as well. Padres obviously the big one. The Mets traded for a bunch of arms, low level, but they did. Not many major players trading. I would say maybe Jazz Chisholm, maybe the biggest name. That was interesting. I was funny to see the Pirates adding some pieces. They're still in contention, minor things, but a couple things that might happen. The Dodgers were quite busy, I saw. They made a lot of trades, reacquired Hamid Rosario, second year in a row to do that. I thought that the Astros paid a really high cost compared to getting Kikuchi, which is just like a mediocre starter. I thought that was a little strange. I love what the Cardinals did. I think Pham and Fetty are very interesting to them. And I will say, my last observation, if you think the White Sox stunk before the trade deadline at the major league level, oh my goodness, they've depleted. Like, how many WAR right now? They're on pace to being one of the worst teams in the history of baseball. That is cool. Talk about a dumpster fire. That's a fire on a fire.
The White Sox, I think they have 27 wins right now, and I think they traded Eric Fetty. He had 7 or 8 of them. You trade that away, that team, you're basically fielding a AAA team right now. So if you need a starting pitcher against for any week coming up, just pick someone against the White Sox or the Marlins. White Sox or Marlins, I think those are the guys to go after, not the Pirates. Pirates got better. The Royals got better also. The Royals are going for it also.
Yeah, Royals, if you remember, my bold prediction this year was that the Royals are going to, I boldly said they would win the division, but it really was, they're going to make the playoffs. Oh, by the way, hold on a second. I'm looking at my phone. Looks like the White Sox are texting me. They need a pitcher. What's that? they're just desperate. Any other impressions, guys, just globally? And then we'll talk more fantasy related.
I was wondering what you guys thought about Garrett Crochet's announcement that he wouldn't. He would insist on getting an extension, or he would refuse to pitch in the playoffs, which absolutely destroyed his trade value because most teams don't want to get into extension talks at this point in the season. It was a very bold move, but I wondered what you guys thought of it from the point of view of you're sitting there in Chicago trying to improve the team, and this guy drops this bomb on you.
Moving?
Well, I think he's stuck in Chicago now. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, no one would want him, and he is probably their only really decent player left, possibly. And he's at a playoff team, so I guess he's gonna have to wait around for the White Sox to turn themselves around, which is gonna be a while because they're actually going for the league record of 40, the modern era record of 40 and 120, which is the 1962 Mets had. So that team is gonna get very close to that, and they are very far away. And from rumors that I heard and rumblings, they may fire their manager within the next week or something like that. That's what I heard. So with all this going around, he makes these comments and he's stuck there. He's basically leaving himself up for for just staying there forever, basically.
I mean, if they did trade him to a team, he's going to say, I'm not going to pitch in the playoffs. That's going to, forget about extension, that's going to destroy his future value. Who's going to want to work with a guy who just quits in the playoffs? I mean, that's just nonsense. I don't actually believe it. I just don't. Is that something that anybody does? Somebody just says, I'm not playing the playoffs? I mean, you can be out of baseball for that.
Something else that came to my mind when we were just talking about Crochet and his threat not to pitch in the playoffs if he's traded. If that's allowed, if the CBA, the general contract that covers all players, if that's allowed in that contract, I think the owners are in a very vulnerable position, because at some point in the future, the union could say, we've decided that we want to have a bigger share of the revenue. And they could do this on August 15th. And they could say, and if we don't get a new CBA before the playoffs start, we're not playing. And the owners get like 60% of their revenue from the playoffs. That would really put them under the gun. And I wonder if anybody realizes that, or if maybe we're just wrong and Crochet was not legally allowed to do it. Maybe he was just going to fake an injury or something like that. I don't know what those ramifications are. But if they can legally just not play, the owners could be in trouble at some future point.
Sounds really bizarre. It really does. Don't know exactly what to make of it, but I'm sure we'll come back to it at some point. Closer situations. A lot of times after the deadline, they have changed. There's some more value, less value. I'll give you a couple points that I have, and we'll go around the room. But Kyle Finnegan, he holds on to his job. I have him in a couple leagues. Only Hunter Harvey was traded. They didn't trade Finnegan as well, so he's going to remain with the same value. He's been great this year. Texas, they didn't sell their bullpen. Kirby Yates is still the guy. Boston, they're still in it, so they did not sell off pieces like Kenley Jansen. In fact, they fortified their bullpen with Luis Garcia. I spent some money on Fab, not a lot, but thinking that he was going to be the guy with Carlos Estevez traded. Well, I mean, he's just a backup for now. Toronto, Chad Green. He is now fortified as a closer. I think he's the guy. Peter Fairbanks, not traded. He's the guy. That is the list of guys who have stayed. And anybody else that guys remain and hold your breath if you own them?
Not that I can think of. I think you covered them all.
Okay.
All the teams that sold off their closers. I mean, in Miami, whoever's there is gonna, I guess, is closer by committee. I don't even know who the committee is there. It's not a great situation there right now. I mean, I guess it's gonna be Fauscher or maybe
Bender?
Nardi
Bender?
or Bender. I mean, some of these guys, they have, and would you even want to touch them? Would you even want to touch a closer on, let's say, the White Sox? Do you if you have Brebbia, do you want to keep him? Do you want to hold a closer like that? Who do you go for? If do you think MacArthur is losing value because Hunter Harvey's there, and they traded also for the high leverage guy from Oakland, Urseg. I mean, there's some guys that were there already that lost value just because teams added on. And one guy, I have to mention this, and this is very important, Clay Holmes. I have him on the team. One of the reasons why I made my trade to get Josh Hader is because we're in New York. We always hear how the Yankees don't have a closer. They got Mark Leiter. Mark Leiter may vulture some saves from Clay Holmes. So Clay Holmes may actually lose some value to Mark Leiter just because of the media here in New York up in arms saying they don't have a quote-unquote true closer on a team that's making the playoffs.
Yeah, interesting there. The teams that you're going to have some murky situations or stuff that we don't know. Kansas City, definitely. Erseg and Harvey and MacArthur, who knows? The Angels, I don't know who the heck is it. I don't even know if it's worth owning. Miami, I think it's Bender, but who knows? Is it worth it? Chicago, forget it. The White Sox, I mean, how many games are they going to actually save? There's maybe they win, I don't know, 15 more games here on in, and only 8 of them are save opportunities. I mean, it is not worth even guessing, and whoever is there stinks. What about Philadelphia? That's a little bit murky. They got Estevez. It's probably still Hoffman. He's been great. So those are some situations. Any other situations that are murky right now?
I heard that the Philadelphia manager said that the new guy that just came in, you just mentioned him, and his
Estevez?
name jumped out of my head. Estevez was going to be the closer, so that is a change, and in crossover leagues might make Carlos Estevez pretty interesting this weekend's fab. I think that there might be a little more uncertainty in Seattle than there was before. Anthony Munoz has had a few injury troubles, like nagging sort of things, and now they have a pretty solid alternative in Jimmy Garcia that they got from Toronto. There was no trade that I can think of in Chicago except for Leiter, who was maybe knocking on the door of replacing Hector Neris, who was having a really bad season. He's had a pretty good last few weeks. But they also brought in Nate Pearson from Toronto, who has been promoted in the Toronto area as a potential future closer as well. So I think there is a bit of unsettledness, even in some areas or situations that might not at first glance appear to be so.
Yeah. Then you had guys losing value like AJ Puck. Some people threw darts at him. That didn't work. And Tanner Scott, I got to tell you, I have Tanner Scott on most of my teams. Ouch. I mean, it's possible he'll get some save opportunities.
Yes, 100% hold him. I actually spoke to Greg Jewett, and he said that Robert Suarez is nearing his innings limit in this year, so it's possible that they're going to try to manage his outings. Jason Adam may get some saves there. Tanner Scott may still get some saves. So even if you still have Tanner Scott, he's a guy I think you still should hold on to because you will get some value out of him, and you may get the occasional save. There's nothing wrong with having a guy who gets 3, 4, 5 saves down the road, but he still helps your ERA and WHIP.
By the way, Patrick, anybody who on your personal fantasy team that were traded or whatever due to the deadline really helped or really hurt your team because of the trade?
Yeah, Jimmy Garcia I had on a couple of teams, including my tout team. He was really helpful, but it's not the same thing. I'm hanging on to him for now because, like I just said, I think Garcia could get some saves and maybe vulture some wins in Seattle if they get their offense back together. Danny Jansen couldn't have been sent to a worse place, except maybe Baltimore, because Connor Wong is the number one guy there, and he's playing well. I like the fact that Zach Eflin goes from Tampa to Baltimore because in Tampa he was getting less than 4 runs per 27 outs of support, and in Baltimore it's like 4.5. So an extra run per outing, and he already showed that once. I have a couple of sort of borderline guys, Ahmed Rosario and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and it's an AL only. That's why I have these guys on my roster.
Yeah.
But both of them are going from semi-regular playing time, I think, into worse situations. Rosario goes to the Dodgers, where last year he was a real part-time type of guy. And Kiner-Falefa might get some playing time because their second baseman there is Jared Triolo, and he's barely over the Mendoza line. He's only got a handful of home runs. He's not really hitting well, and Kiner-Falefa was hitting well before he got hurt in Toronto. So there's those guys, and I had Luis Garcia on every one of my teams. I picked him up expecting that there'd be a trade of Estevez, and then 5 minutes later I look at my computer and oh my God, Garcia's gone too. Now I wish I'd have picked up Hunter Strickland or Ben Joyce.
I was hopeful that Tanner Scott wouldn't get traded because he got traded like 90 minutes before the deadline, and I'm like, oh, he didn't make it,
I actually have Lane Thomas. Lane Thomas, I have a few shares of him. He went from Washington to Cleveland. They talk about going from the basement to the penthouse. He's going to a very good lineup where he's going to score a lot of runs, that team run, so he's still going to get the stolen bases. So I like that a lot. And you mentioned Kikuchi. In GDD, I have Kikuchi. And him going from Toronto to Houston, I think can only help him a change of scenery. Maybe he wasn't pitching well last couple of times because he was thinking about it. He actually mentioned before he got traded that he's come to terms that he was going to get traded. So I think it was in the back of his mind that he was going to get traded. That may have affected his last couple of starts. So I think that you may see a little uptick and a little bit more out of Kikuchi just because he's with Houston and a better chance for wins as well.
Yeah. Any other players, Ruvain, that you think that were traded, specifically were traded, that looks like gained a nice amount of value?
Tommy Pham, better lineup,
absolutely.
better place. It's amazing. I mentioned Kikuchi already. Zach Eflin was mentioned already. Trevor Rogers going to Baltimore. he may find something there that he may share tips with Grayson Rodriguez. You never know, and he may figure out a new pitch, and he may be better. He may get more wins there. It's not as good as a ballpark. I mean, I'd probably rather be pitching in Florida, in Miami, but I mean, it's a sort of a pitcher's park this year, so it's not that bad, and he's going to get a lot more wins. And a little bit under the radar guy, the Padres got Martin Perez. He's going to start every day. He's available in a lot of leagues. In the beginning of the year, he was really good. He went through a small slump, but he's a guy he's available in a lot of places, and you never know. If you pick him up, you can spot start him. He's on a good team with a good bullpen. So if he leaves the game, let's say after 5 innings with a 3-1 lead or 3-2 lead, he's going to get that win because that bullpen is so much better.
Yeah, Martin Perez, if you play Immaculate Grid, he's starting to come up there on a bunch of answers now. He's played with Texas, Minnesota, Boston, Texas again, Pittsburgh, and now with Padres. So starting to get up there. Patrick, anybody else to add to players who've gained some good value?
Well, on the gaining value, actually, one of my entries is Martin Perez for exactly the same reasons. He goes from the rusty lunch truck in Pittsburgh to the Waldorf Astoria buffet in San Diego. Way more runs scored, that fantastic bullpen. I'd still stream him probably, but I think anytime you get to start him in a favorable situation, you have a strong chance of getting a win. I also had Lane Thomas down and Jazz Chisholm, the guys that you'd pretty much expect.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah, he already got two homer games already.
Yeah, I have him in Tout Wars. Yippee.
Yeah.
Christopher Morel, I actually think that is going to help him. The change of scenery, I think that he's going to excel. So, he's batting close to 200. I think that's only going to go up. Josh Bell, that's a huge, huge increase. He's going to bat in the heart of the Diamondbacks lineup with Christian Walker probably out. I'm sure, Ruben, you'll cover him later, I'm sure. Brian De La Cruz, great, much better situation being in Pittsburgh than Miami. And Joey Loperfido, he might be hitting in the heart of the Toronto Blue Jays order. That was a big part of the trade that they got for Kikuchi. I think he could be very interesting. That's somebody who maybe people don't have on rosters, especially in shallow or mixed leagues. That could be an interesting pickup for the rest of the year, Joey Loperfido.
Loperfido hit second in the lineup in the batting order his first game in Toronto. And I'll second that emotion because Loperfido in AAA this year was absolutely a monster. And then Houston brought him up, and for some reason they didn't play him. They actually played John Singleton with his 620 OPS in front of Loperfido. Now, be prepared for a lot of strikeouts, I'll tell you that. But he's kind of one of those big guys like Joey Gallo or a guy like that who's going to 35% strikeout rate, but might get 35 home runs.
Let's go to players traded that maybe loses some value. Patrick, who's somebody who was traded that going to be a drop or at least a drop in value?
Well, any of the closers who go to good teams and
sure.
Therefore become setup guys. Kevin Kiermaier was a pretty good fantasy asset in Toronto, but he was playing a lot, and that was the reason why. He's getting a lot of plate appearances. And then he goes to the Dodgers, probably a defensive replacement type guy. He's not going to get a lot of plate appearances because they're a real mix and match operation out there in Los Angeles. There's a few others, but those are the ones that jumped immediately to mind. Anybody who's moving down the batting order or gets into a worse pitching situation, of course. But yeah, I'm going to go with Kiermaier and all the closers that I had who went to other teams. No, I'm not getting any saves.
Yeah, closers obviously there. I'll give you two to add. Mark Canha, I think that's a little bit of a drop in value. And somebody with the same initials as you, Patrick Davitt, Paul DeJong, goes to a worse park. He might not even be a starter anymore. So Paul DeJong might lose quite a lot of value, I think. Is he going to start over Bobby Witt Jr.? No.
Did he have any value to lose?
Oh, he had a lot of homers.
Yeah, he did. He had a horrible batting average, but a lot of home runs. He was like a home run leader.
15-team leagues. He was great.
Yeah. Why not? As your middle infielder, why not? But another guy, Ariel, I can't believe you didn't mention. He's on the Mets. Jesse Winker, he's going to lose value.
Oh yeah.
He's going to lose at bats toward the end of the game because he's going to be taken out for defensive replacements. So he, instead of getting 4 or 5 at bats in a game, he may only get 3 or 4. So you're cutting down almost a quarter of his at bats.
We don't like to list Mets as losing value. We just don't want to do that. That's why I didn't mention.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll take that back if okay.
What about a player trade that was not traded that lost value due to these trades, Patrick?
Well, this came up earlier, but I think the whole rest of the Tampa Bay Rays lineup loses their table setters and run producers in Paredes and Arozarena, and getting back Christopher Morel to fill the spot. And I know Morel's got big power, but he's another 200 hitter. And I don't know that the rest of the guys, they were already having trouble scoring runs, and losing Paredes and Arozarena. I don't know. I think that all of those guys are affected, even though they weren't traded. And similarly, the White Sox entire lineup, because they lost everybody except Luis Robert. And boy, I wonder what he thinks when he gets up in the morning.
Ruben, anybody to add?
Yeah, a guy we didn't mention, from one of the closers we didn't mention, Paul Sewald. I think he's going to lose value because if he starts to fumble and has a couple more bad outings, they have A.J. Puck. They still have Kevin Ginkel, who people were picking up a couple weeks ago thinking he was going to be replaced. They have Dylan Floro now, who's closed before with the Marlins. So they have a lot of different options out there that if Paul Sewald starts to falter a little bit, he can lose a lot of opportunities.
Well, I'll mention a few. We were looking, Ruvain, in one league to pick up. Who should we pick up as there? And we were looking at Gavin Lux. Should we pick him up? The Dodgers signaled pretty clearly that they don't trust the dude. They got Tommy Edman and Ahmed Rosario. I think that Gavin Lux is going to lose some value. In Cleveland, Tyler Freeman, who always floated around the top of my queue as a potential pickup in deeper mixed leagues. Tyler Freeman is going to, because of the Lane Thomas trade, he's going to lose some playing time. DJ LeMahieu, I think with Jazz Chisholm here, even though he had a great day yesterday, he is going to lose playing time. And I'll mention with Jorge Soler coming back to the Braves, Adam Duvall, Jared Kelenic, who've been platooning, you're going to see them to start losing some value. So I'll see that. I'll say one more. In Milwaukee, Savali and Frankie Montas came over. Someone's got to lose some innings somewhere. They've got a lot of starters. Tobias Myers, Colin Ray, Joe Ross. One of those has got to go to the bullpen or longer relief. So you're going to see a little bit of an inning shuffle in Milwaukee. What about a player who is not traded that could gain value from the trades, Patrick?
Another name that has already come up, Chad Green in Toronto. Everybody gets traded out from in front of him, so he inherits the saves more or less by default. Anybody who's sitting behind a traded closer, there's the guys in Miami that you guys talked about.
Hunter Strickland is a possibility, yep.
You guys mentioned Calvin Fauché, Anthony Bender, and Andrew Nardi in Miami. And Nardi's actually a pretty good guy to target because I think that he's going to be able to be had on waiver wires because his ERA is over 5, but his Sierra is like 2.5 or something like that. He's actually having a really good year, but just tremendous bad luck. So I think those kind of guys, the closers who leave and leave a good situation for the guys who fall in behind. Now, not a lot of saves in Miami, I understand.
Yeah, the only thing, though, Patrick, I'd say is that Nardi is one of the only lefties in the bullpen. Tanner Scott was, so that's why there's no problem. They also had Nardi. I don't think it's Nardi because of the lefty-righty thing. I think Anthony Bender, is a better chance.
If they get two left-handed hitters in the ninth.
Understandably, I think Nardi's in the mix, but if I had to throw a dart, I would personally go Bender over Nardi. I could be wrong. I'm not very confident in this, but I'll give Bender the nod. Plus, he's Howard Bender's cousin. I don't know if you know this.
No, I don't.
No, he's not. I'm just
Now you're mentioning all these guys who are in the majors. There are two guys who I'm looking at in the minors who are going to benefit big time from the trades. Dylan Cruz. With Lane Thomas being traded, it clears a spot in the outfield for Dylan Cruz. He will be brought up sometime. We had a prospect episode before. He will be brought up, and Junior Caminero will be brought up. Third base is now available for him to take because Paredes was traded. So those are two guys that if they're still on the waiver wire, you may want to pick up because they will be called up within the near future.
Yeah, we've been waiting all year for Junior Caminero, holding on to him for. Hopefully, we'll be rewarded soon. I do have a fab strategy question, Patrick. Of course, you're going to have these replacement players, either closers or other players, minors, whoever. What kind of fab spending should you spend on these guys? Because remember, if you're in a deeper league, there's not going to be that many people that come up in the end that you're going to say, "Oh wow, this guy is worth it," right? You only have 2 months left, and whoever comes up is for a short period of time, and very clearly right now it might be the best opportunity to get somebody who's really impactful. How much fab are you going to be willing to spend? Let's say you've got 300 out of 1,000 left. What are you going to spend, on a guy like Caminero right now, or or a closer, a Hunter Strickland, a Dart, or Nardi, Bender, whoever you want to pick?
Well, if it was a dart like that, I would probably put in a 30 or 30, 40 kind of bid, because I think if you're going to splash out half of your remaining fab, put a $150 bid in, I think you have to be more confident than you can be in the Miami bullpen situation. And if I saw the opportunity, I would put in a 50% or 60% of my remaining budget on a guy, because we're running out of time. And
Yeah.
if you don't spend it, you don't get to take it home and buy a hamburger with it. So you might as well get at it now. You should hang on to some money for the rest of the year to do the maintenance moves every week that you need to do, whatever you think that's going to cost you. $5-10 a week, or $7 a week, or something like that. Make sure you have money right to the very end. Take it from one who knows. I had a year once where I ran out of money with about 3 weeks to go, and it doesn't sound like much, but it actually is pretty bad to not have that opportunity to get anybody to fill in for an injury.
Ruvain?
Yeah, well, one quick tip I'd actually add is that if you're looking to see how much you want to spend on fab, look the past couple of weeks, see how much the top possible closer went for. Look how much the top possible hitter went for. When you look at those things, you'll have a better idea of how much you should really be spending. Then look around and see how much money everyone has left. Who's actually going to be spending it? Are the bottom teams even spending any more in your league? If they're not, then you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to put such a big bid. You can put a bid commensurate to how much everyone else who you're fighting for gets. You don't have to overbid on anybody. You just have to overbid to the person who's closest to you.
Well, good points there. Let's do a bit of waiver wire. Patrick, who's somebody or a couple people that you might want to pick up this week?
I'm looking at Kyle Stowers, who used to be in Baltimore and couldn't fight his way back into that stacked lineup, but I think he's going to step right into the middle of the Miami order. He's going to play pretty regularly in left field. And I understand that it's Miami, but as I said earlier, plate appearances are plate appearances. And one thing about being on a team like Miami is that there's not that much competition for the playing time. And another thing about being on Miami is that the leadoff hitter, Xavier Edwards, has a 450 OBP. I also had Junior Caminero and another guy in Tampa. Curtis Mead was called up when Yandy Diaz went on the restricted list. Mead was actually hitting pretty well, 847 OPS in AAA, and he might be able to sneak in and get some run with the departure of Paredes. All he has to do is out-hit Jose Caballero, who has a 671 OPS. So Curtis Mead, a lot of Tampa Ray fans have been waiting a long time for Curtis Mead to show up. Maybe this is the time.
Yeah, all good stuff there. Ruvain?
Well, I'm going to bring up the first guy that obviously you don't like, and that's Gavin Lux. I actually mentioned him last week. I'm going to mention him again now because he has hits in the last 6 or 7 games, and since July 7th, he's raised his batting average from 207 to 239, hitting 4 of his 6 home runs so far this year. If he continues to play like this, if he continues to hit, you got to ride him. And he is available in 25% of leagues. He's not going to cost you that much because of what everyone the Dodgers got. But Tommy Edman is he 100%? Is he going to play every day? You don't know how it's going to work out there. So Gavin Lux will still get some playing time there. Another guy who we mentioned before, and that's Jake McCarthy. He's batting 294 with 15 stolen bases on the year. But he's 12 for his last 22. And he's only 16% owned in CBS. So if you need a stolen base guy, he's been playing almost every day recently. He's a guy to look at, and in much, much deeper leagues in St. Louis. Mike Ciani. He's only 2% owned in CBS, but over the last 2 weeks, This over the last 2 weeks, he's 13 for 31, which is a 419 average, with 4 stolen bases. He has 14 stolen bases and 2 home runs on the year so far. For a guy who's only owned in 2% of leagues, yes, he wasn't playing that much to begin with, but if he continues to produce, I think the Cardinals will just keep putting him out there because why not?
Good stuff there. I'll go much more shallow. Austin Hayes, 15% owned. I liked him preseason, and I think after the trade, he's now in a better ballpark. He already has a homer. He'll probably get a bump in playing time from what he was before. This is for medium deep leagues or so, but Austin Hayes is interesting. Victor Robles having a decent year, hitting 300s, 13 stolen bases. He's interesting in shallow middle leagues now for that stolen base and average 4 to 5. And how about Matt Wallner? Ruven, you went to a game where Wallner was the pitcher in a lopsided Met game, right?
Yep, that was great. He actually pitched pretty well. He actually didn't allow a run in the ninth inning. He gave up something in the eighth, but he actually pitched pretty well. It was kind of funny. His first 3 pitches were 40 miles an hour. Then when he got to 2 strikes, he threw it 80 miles an hour, which was kind of funny. It was really, really cool to watch.
Yeah, that's a fantastic game to go to. Yeah, but he looks interesting, so I'd give a look in deeper leagues for there. Let's do pitcher preview. Patrick, who is somebody that might help you a pitcher, maybe this week, maybe next week, or in the coming future?
Well, I got a couple of guys I'd like to mention. The knuckleballer, Matt Waldron, gets a two-step this week. In Pittsburgh on Tuesday and in Miami on Sunday. I know it's 2 road games, but holy cow, how much better of a two-step can you get than Pittsburgh and Miami, especially after the deadline in Miami? It's going to be terrible. Pittsburgh's a quarter run under league average in runs per game. Miami's one of 3 teams that's not even scoring 4 runs per game, and I bet that goes down. I really like Matt Waldron for this two-step. And J.P. Sears of Oakland gets, how about this? The White Sox in Oakland on Monday. And then he has to go to Toronto on Sunday to face a Jays team that is in disarray. They're having a lot of trouble scoring runs. The body language on the guys on the team is terrible. I think they're just going to be playing out the strings. So I know J.P. Sears is not the kind of guy that we normally look at for fantasy purposes, but I think he's actually not as bad as people think. He's okay in some circumstances, and I would start Ariel against the White Sox, so I'll start J.P. Sears.
Yeah, I have him on my list as well. I think that you can't ignore. I'm not into the streaming thing this year, but that's a can't miss. Ruven?
Well, I was going to say JP Sears, so you got that guy ready. I'm going to go with David Peterson. He's one start I think he's at Colorado. So it's not a great place to pitch, but he is actually pitching pretty well if he can get to 5 innings. Last couple starts, the fourth inning has been an issue for him. Once he gets to the fifth inning, he's usually able to finish it, and you need that length. You're playing a bad Colorado team. The Mets score a lot of runs, and they're going to Colorado. I like that matchup. He's only 33% on CBS. And another one-star pitcher, I mentioned him before, and that's Martin Perez. He's scheduled to start against Miami at Miami. I like that he's only 13% on CBS. He's a guy who's I think will start trending up.
I'll throw in a few. Trevor Rogers, he gets at Toronto this week, and then the following week versus Washington versus Boston. That could be interesting. Jose Quintana, he gets Seattle away this week, but he's been pitching great lately, and the Mets have been hitting. Jose Quintana, I think he's under-owned. Tyler Mahle, he's coming back. He might even be to start this coming week. Interesting as a dart. How about Alex Faedo on Detroit? 2-start at Seattle, at San Francisco. That's interesting to me. And this guy, he's 50% owned. Hayden Birdsong, having a great year for San Francisco. He's 3-0 with a sub-3 ERA, 3.76 Sierra, so it's mostly legit. He's got a 30% strikeout rate and a K-minus BB of 18%, and that tracks with his minors numbers. Like, he looks to be producing what he did in the minors here. He's earned the rotation spot. 8 strikeouts in 5 innings in his last outing. 12 strikeouts in 6 innings before that. He has not allowed more than 3 earned runs in any single outing this year. And the Giants, have pitchers who pitch deeper into games than some. I think he's an interesting guy. This is not for deeper leagues where he'll be picked up, but now shallow leagues, definitely consider having Birdsong in your lineup. Anybody else? Anyone else to talk about? Hitter, pitcher, whoever?
No, I think we covered everything that I had written down on my piece of paper. So a really good session.
A lot of good stuff. All right, and before we do the injury update, I am told that we have another Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
So the first guy I want to talk about on my injury update is going to be Mike Trout. Mike Trout was diagnosed with a second meniscus tear in the same knee he had surgery on. He's expected to miss the rest of the year, and that's very sad to hear. But after hearing this news, I did some digging, and Patrick, my bonus question for the week is this. Now that we know Mike Trout is done for the year, can you rank these players who played the least to most games since 2020? Okay? Least to most games since 2020. Byron Buxton, Mike Trout, Giancarlo Stanton, or Anthony Rendon. From least to most games played.
Rendon's
Wait a second, I got to write these down. Buxton,
Stanton, Trout, and Rendon.
It's got to be Rendon the least.
Rendon's, yeah, I was going to say Rendon's got to be the least. And then I would say Buxton next least.
Ariel, what do you think?
I'm going to say Stanton is the next least, Trout, and then Buxton the most.
Okay, so Rendon, since 2020, has played in only 233 games. Since 2020. That's an average of, that's not a good average at all. Second least games played, Mike Trout at 319. Third least, or actually second most on this list, Byron Buxton. He played 359 games since 2020. And Giancarlo Stanton has played the most of these other four of most games played. He played 445 games since 2020. So we always talk about how these injured players, how long they're out for. It's really sad that we're going to miss Mike Trout. He hasn't been healthy. He's got another 6 years left on his contract. He's signed
How much money is he being paid now?
37 million. I believe it's 37 million per year for the next 6 years. It's through 2030. So that's just not great for the Angels. But continuing with the injury update, you mentioned Christian Walker. He is on the IL with a left oblique strain. He's only expected to miss about 3 weeks, but they called up Pavin Smith, and you mentioned Josh Bell, so he's going to take his place as well. Evan Carter, Rangers GM Chris Young said that Carter isn't expected to play again during the regular season. He is done.
Whoa.
So he's a guy that if you have on your roster, they didn't say he had any setbacks or anything. I'm quite aware of that. The GM already said this was 2 days ago. He's not playing again. They said maybe he may be available for the playoffs. We'll see about that. Nick Gonzalez from Pittsburgh. He was playing almost every day. He's on the IL with a groin strain. Again, the wording how they said this, they said he is expected to return before the end of the season. I'm not understanding what that means. Does that mean he's going to be out for an extended period of time? I guess that's what it means. And two more. Max Muncy. He's the forgotten Dodger. He's set to resume swinging as he quote-unquote crossed a hurdle after visiting a chiropractor.
What do the Dodgers get all these players for?
Because they can't count on these other players, so they're getting insurance. And speaking of insurance, Mookie Betts, he's on the IL with a fractured left hand. He's already taking batting practice this week, and Dave Roberts said that returning in a couple of weeks is very realistic.
Oh, and also speaking of insurance, Ariel, does a team like the Angels or any team with one of these injury-prone guys, is there insurance that they can take out to get some insurance company to pay that $37 million a year for 5 years, or some part of it in exchange for some kind of premium?
I mean, yeah, for sure. A lot of these players with the big contracts are insured. I mean, remember David Wright was insured with the Mets, and that paid out. Of course, anyone who has these large contracts, there's always some type of insurance associated. And if a primary carrier doesn't give it, there's somebody in the Lloyd's of London who will offer it. So, absolutely.
And especially a player like Mike Trout, his stature when he signed the contract, I'm sure the Angels did take some insurance on him just in case, because he was the prize player, the best player in baseball when he signed the contract. The Angels would have been not business savvy to not get the insurance.
Do you remember Mark McGwire when he was hitting all those home runs that year? I remember the Cardinals took out an insurance policy. It was my company. I didn't work for them at the time, but my company helped broker the deal. They had an insurance company if he got injured because, I mean, they were selling out every single game. And without him being there, it was not only was the production, but the revenue from the seats.
Oh,
That was
boy,
going to be
yeah.
tremendous if you guys remember that.
Do. And also, speaking of insurance, I don't know if I ever told you guys, but a long time ago when I was first just starting out with Baseball HQ Radio, the podcast, I interviewed a guy, an insurance guy, who was setting up an insurance policy that you could write on your most important fantasy player on your team. That if he got hurt and missed the rest of the season,
yeah.
then you could put in a claim and get your entry fee back. And when I talked to the guy, he said, this is not for guys playing in home leagues with $100 entry fees, but he said even then, this is back 2008, 2007, something like that. But even then, there were guys playing in $50,000, $100,000 fantasy leagues, and it was one of those guys who actually got in touch with him and said, I want to write a policy on my entry fee based on, I forget who his top guy was, but he said, if he gets injured, I don't have a chance of winning, and I want to be able to get my entry fee back. And the guy wrote him, and it went on for a couple of years, and then gradually it petered out. I called him a few years later and said, "You still doing that?" And he said, "Nah, the company didn't like it, and they were taking some losses." So,
Oh yeah, didn't the NFBC used to do that? Didn't they offer an insurance policy for one player?
I think you're right. I think I remember you could pay a little premium and protect your roster from.
Well, that's why they don't do it anymore, because obviously it was not a big enough premium, and they just took losses. If any insurance company is losing money on policies, guess what happened? They stopped writing the programs.
Well,
tell all the people who live on the North Carolina coast.
In our labor league together, we have an insurance policy that if a big player is out, you're able to return for a certain amount of fab. So that there's some leagues have built-in insurance policies also.
Yeah, we have that in tout. Yeah, the fab reclaim for injured players. It's I don't know if I'd call it insurance. I feel like it's just a refund.
Yeah.
More.
Well, you know what? It also and when you have that and you have the ability to you have to pay a little bit extra, but you get back a couple $100 in FPC if your guy does it and you pick one player. It changes the way you draft. Like you might want to do a starter, like a Spencer Strider. Might have been, I don't know if he gets hurt, but if you have insurance on him, you might be more likely to pick him. It changes the way people draft.
I bet it does. Yeah, I mean, Insurance changes people's behavior in all kinds of ways. They become less risk averse.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fantastic episode. Just a lot of stuff we went through. Thank you so much, Patrick Davitt, for coming on the show and helping us through all the deadline deals with trading strategy and your waiver picks. Patrick, why don't you just tell everybody what's going on with you and where we can read your stuff and listen to you?
Not much reading anymore, but I'm going to fix that in this off season coming up. But every week and sometimes twice a week, Baseball HQ Radio is available on most of the standard pod getters. Do a search on Baseball HQ and our logo should pop up. And it's a pretty good show. I've had Ariel on, and I'm having Jason Collette this week. Later on, I think we've got Paul Sporer coming, Mike Gianella from Baseball Prospectus, Doug Dennis from Baseball HQ. So plenty of good guests coming up. Fred Zinke's going to be on the show too.
Yeah, I mean, the Baseball HQ Radio podcast to me has always been the gold standard of podcasts. I remember, Patrick, the first time you asked me on the show, I'm like, wow, what an incredible honor. It's always an honor every single year, of course, but your first is always the most memorable, I think. And I can't believe you asked me. I was on your show 3 times this year. I can't believe it. Thank you so much for the honor.
Well, you're a good guest, and I appreciate you coming on. I know that anytime you get a guest on a show like I'm on guesting on your show, there's a little prep work to do because you want to, sound like you have an idea what's going on. And I know from having talked to you, Ariel, in the many times that you've been on the show, that you always come very well prepared. I imagine that's what helps make you a really good drafter, because you seem to have everything organized in your mind in a way that just fills me full of confidence in you as a guest that this is going to be a terrific show, and it always is.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. And also, I'm very good looking. That's why I do a good job also.
Well, that's why we do podcasts and not video.
Good stuff. All right, Ruvain, what about you? What's going on with you?
You can follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out the injury updates, next player up, and everything like that. Plus, you can catch my weekly article on Rotoballer discussing all the injuries I discussed today, as well as many more.
All right, I'm Ariel Cohen. I'm on Fangraphs, Rotoballer, Twitter X at ATCNY, and of course on the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. We are going to do an ATC projections update. Have to let the deadline deal simmer a little bit so that they get into some of the underlying projections. So wait a couple of days, and hopefully we'll get something out next week. No promises on the exact timing, but it should come in the next 7 to 10 days, I'm just going to say. And that will be one of the more final updates of the year. I'll probably do one right after Labor Day, and that'll be it for updating. Of course, I say updating is the rates. Playing time of ATC projections is updated every single night on Fangraphs. All right. Well, thank you so much once again for Patrick Davitt for coming on the show. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.